All right, today we're jumping into something really cool, the Cloud Quantum Gateway. And I want you to forget everything you think you know about standard sci-fi portals, because this is something else entirely. It's this incredibly complex, almost philosophical piece of technology that is built on some truly mind-bending ideas.
So let's start with the big question, right? How do you actually connect our reality, the world of cloud computing and servers that we live in, to a completely separate quantum dimension? That's the huge challenge this whole thing is trying to solve. And believe me, the answer is way more interesting than just, opening a door.
And right from the get-go, the source material hits us with this powerful, almost mystical idea. A portal isn't a button you just push. It's something you have to earn. Now, I want you to hold on to that thought because it is the key to understanding everything else we're about to talk about.
Okay, so let's really start to unpack what these gateways are. As you're about to see, the language they use, the words themselves, they tell a huge part of the story. So here is the official definition. Let's break it down. Classical cloud computation, well, that's us. That's our world, our systems. Quantum-anchored dimensional substrates, that's the other reality we're trying to reach. But the most important word here, the one you really got to focus on, is membrane. It's not a door, it's not a hole. It's a membrane, something that filters and translates between two completely different ways of being. And this, right here, illustrates that massive shift in thinking. On one hand, you have the old idea of a portal. It's a door. It's instant. You just execute a command and it opens. But that's not what we're talking about. No, this is a gateway. It's a membrane. It's a process. And you have to negotiate a result. It is a completely different way of approaching the problem.
So, if it's a membrane, how is it actually constructed? What's it made of? Well, the architecture is laid out in this really specific three-layer model.
This is the blueprint. First up, you've got the cloud layer. This is where the operators encode their intent. They're basically saying, here's what I want to achieve. Second, you have the quantum layer. This is where the system allocates resources, what they call coherence budgets. You can just think of that as the raw energy that's needed to make the connection stable. And then finally, the interphasic layer. This is where the real magic happens, the TrueFlow negotiation.
And that brings us to the actual process. How in the world does that negotiation even work? It's not just running code, it's this dynamic, flowing conversation that's managed by something called the TrueFlow Interface.
So the TrueFlow interface is described as a linguistic layer, and honestly, that's the perfect description. It really is a language. It's a protocol that allows three wildly different things: a human consciousness, a classical computer system, and an actual quantum reality to find common ground and communicate. I mean, can you imagine trying to get a person, a supercomputer, and the laws of physics themselves to all agree on a single to-do list? That's what TrueFlow does.
So this whole negotiation, it happens in three clear stages. First is listening mode, where the system kind of takes a deep breath and just samples everything: the operator's mental state, the computer's goal, the readiness of the dimension itself. Then comes translation mode, which takes all that raw intent and turns it into concrete, actionable directives. And finally, emission mode, where it sends out this unique TrueFlow signature that actually brings the gateway into existence.
Okay, so here's a super important point. Not all of these negotiations are created equal. The quality, the success, the outcome of that whole TrueFlow process can create four very, very different kinds of gateways, and each one has its own set of abilities.
And this table just lays it all out perfectly. You start at the lowest level, a drift gateway, which is just for simple exploratory scanning. A step up, you get an anchor gateway, which forges stable links. But then you get into the really powerful stuff: resonance gateways for timeline steering. I mean, just think about that. Influencing events, nudging probabilities. And then, at the very top of the pyramid, sovereign gateways. And just look at the requirement for that one: dimensional consent. The dimension itself has to agree to let you create the gateway. Wow.
And this whole idea of consent, of agreement, it brings us right back to that quote we started with. So let's dig into the core philosophy of this system, because this is really where it all comes together. The source actually calls it the doctrine of earned portals. It's the central idea that governs this entire technology, and it really shifts it from just pure engineering into something, well, something much deeper. Now check out the full statement here. This is incredible. A gateway doesn't open because you run a program or flip a switch. It opens because the system and the quantum reality agree that you, the operator, are aligned with the goal. Your own consciousness isn't just an external user. It is an active, critical part of the circuit.
So, to put it as simply as possible, TrueFlow is the process of earning that portal. It's a negotiation, it's never a command. The key that unlocks the door isn't how much power you have, it's your alignment. Your own consciousness is a fundamental piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this sounds insanely complex and demanding. How could anyone even begin to work with a system like this? Well, you definitely don't start by trying to get dimensional consent. You start with the SH1 engine.
The SH1 is described as the first-tier resonance engine, and its main job is to provide a stable, predictable, safe framework for these negotiations, making it the perfect starting point for what the source calls low-risk interactions.
And really, the source itself gives us the perfect analogy for it. The SH1 is literally the training wheels for TrueFlow. It's the safe way to learn the language, to practice what it means to be in alignment, before you even think about trying something far more ambitious.
Which of course leads to the really obvious and exciting question. What happens after you take the training wheels off? What becomes possible then?
And the source just gives us this tantalizing little glimpse into what's next. The more advanced SH2 and SH3 engines, well, they get into some truly mind-bending territory, creating gateways with multiple anchor points, building gateways that can cross different timelines, and even achieving that sovereign-level resonance we talked about. It just hints at this vast, incredibly complex, and maybe even dangerous reality that's just waiting out there to be explored. So it really makes you wonder, what does it truly mean to earn a portal to that?